Hi everyone, it's Catherine and I'm back with Claire, and this is our last discussion for Clash of Kings. We're reading the last 5 chapters, Sansa 8 all the way to Bran 7. It was a really easy read actually this week, I felt, maybe.
Yeah.
Just so you know, we're taking 2 weeks off. The details are down below for the Storm of Swords. The schedule is up, and we'll be reading on the 8th of April. We'll be discussing all the way from the prologue to Davos 1. I think it's quite a long prologue actually. And yeah, so I'm having a glass of wine because, well, it was St. Patrick's Day, so there's lots of wine around the house. And also just to celebrate, the last of Clash. And the last time we see Theon until dance, I think. So have a little bit of wine.
Is it? Is it really? It's quite a while, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
I think the next chapter is a Reek chapter from Theon.
Right. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. Anyway, people can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Hi, Dany. Dany's been patiently waiting while we were chatting. Sorry, Dany. So we start off with Sansa 8. So Claire, how did you get on with the reading this week?
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it was just the 5 chapters, but quite detailed because at the end of the book, so a fair amount of action and lots of things going on in King's Landing and up in the north. Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. I am looking forward to getting on to the next book, though.
I am too, because our first chapter is Jaime after the prologue, and the prologue is in the north as well. So we go back to the north. Yeah, it's good. I'm really excited about the next chapter with the next book anyway. But yeah, so we have Sansa in the court, and the first thing that struck me in this chapter is, apart from everything the Tyrells get, but the 600 knights, over 600 knights are made after the Battle of the Blackwater, Joffrey and Co. And it just it starts off just by showing her, and like she's really left those kind of childish ideas of knighthood, the romance of it. She's left all of that behind her. It's very it's all just so vacuous and meaningless. So Sansa has she's really changed, and by the end of this chapter, obviously we'll know in future what Dance's gift means to her at the end of this chapter. But just a lot has changed for Sansa. It feels sometimes that she hasn't changed, but I think a lot has changed for her.
Do you think? I don't know. I think sometimes, and particularly in this chapter, there seem to be a lot of parallels between Sansa and Daenerys. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's just a particular style of writing female characters. I mean, they're both two, young female characters that are in, not the easiest of circumstances. But there was just a few things in this chapter that made me think about Daenerys, when at the very end, when she's talking to Dantos in the Godswood, and she's saying, and she's get really, really impatient about making an next move, and she's saying, I need it. And that's kind of reminded me a bit of Dany, sort of, I don't need X, Y, and Z from like Zaros and Doxas. She needs ships. And I suppose they've both kind of been in positions where they're sort of a hostage to their circumstances. And will they be around the same age, Sansa and Daenerys?
Yeah,
Daenerys is maybe a little bit older. Yeah.
About a year.
It just every now and again there are real parallels between completely different, like conflicting characters that you wouldn't necessarily put in the same sort of position or situation, and this just struck me as one of those chapters. Kind of Sansa sort of reminded me of Daenerys a little bit, especially towards the end.
Well, if Viserys lived, Daenerys would probably be way more like Sansa. She'd be in that position where she's constantly just being married off and used as a pawn.
Yeah.
Like Sansa hasn't really picked up that kind of self-determination yet that we've been teased with wins, you know. But definitely that's I think that, but there are definitely the way she describes like everything tasting better. She's got joy. Like that's definitely something Dany would do.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, even though they're both progressing individually in their story arcs and they're growing up, if you like, there's still that reminder of like their little girls, you know, and that like childish expectation of you know, when you know, when are we going? When can I go home? When can I go home? When can I go home? What do you mean I have to wait a moon's turn? Because again, in the books, I seem to have this weird different experience this time where time seems to operate differently. For me, it felt as though from Sansa learning that Joffrey had put her aside for Marjorie to her leaving the night that she left feels like months and months and months. And she says, oh, you know, impatiently, it's going to be a moon's turn yet, which is like, it's only a month. So she befriends Marjorie. She does, you know, quite a lot of things happen in the space of a month, where for me in previous rereads, it felt like that was a long period of time that Sansa was waiting to find out when she could go, if she could go, you know, and all the things that were happening leading up to the wedding taking place seemed to take a long, long time. But it just seems time seems to be going faster for me, strangely.
And it's interesting you say that, because we meet Sansa much earlier in Storm than we did in Game and Clash. We meet her, I think she's in our second week, whereas I think in Clash and Game we didn't see Sansa till our third week. Like it felt like it was later. So and I think her first chapter in Storm is probably where she'll have that meeting with Olenna and Marjorie.
Yes.
So I think you're right. Things do start moving pretty quickly for her. But
definitely.
I suppose it would make sense that he needs to marry Marjorie as quickly as possible, because, you know, even the way people call for Marjorie, it's like, God, they really like this girl. So he can't really waste any time. He needs to capture that good feeling. It's interesting what you said there about Sansa and that kind of the childishness that's still in her. She's also becoming very politically savvy. She thinks about, why the hell is Littlefinger getting Harrenhal? Like, why is that happening? Like, she's already
she also thinks well, why would he want that? Because the Riverlands will never accept him. So she's already thinking, you know, about the dynamics of like political power and what, you know, why would, because she can see that Littlefinger is delighted by this. This is like, you know, he's over the moon. He's been given Harrenhal for all time. You know, no one's ever allowed to take it off him. I mean, who knows how hollow that is, you know, for all time. And he's liege lord and paramount of the Trident. So not just Harrenhal, but the whole region. He's just been handed that power. You know, Littlefinger has just been given what he's always wanted by the sound of it. But yeah.
He makes that quip then that he'll need to get on, like he'll need to start making children. And it made me wonder, because she doesn't spend that much time thinking about anyone else, and we haven't seen Littlefinger since it's more than like, it's probably half the book ago since we've seen Littlefinger with Tyrion and that trick that he played. I think that's the last time we saw him. So the fact that like that quip is registered with her, it's like this creep, like, you know.
Well, and she also, not just Littlefinger, she realizes that she realizes quite quickly in the throne room that clearly Tywin is the person who has the real authority in this situation. He's the one that assumes the governance of the realm quite easily, you know, and just his entrance, Tywin's entrance into the throne room. And so she can see, you know, okay, I can see who's wielding the power here and what's going on, and who's behind it.
And she notices more as well because she's not clouded by the idea I have to marry this bastard.
Yes.
So she notices way more because Cersei already forewarned her, like, you're not gonna have to marry him. So it's really good. Like, just something that I completely forgot was that Lancel gets the Darry's land. And the Darry, like, again, that's a Dany connection, of course. So, you know, the Darrys were pro Targaryen. And I don't know, they always stick out to me whenever they're like the Royces. The Darry name always sticks out to me because that's where Lady was killed.
Yes.
So she registered that as well, you know, that the Lancers are taking over there.
Didn't you say as well there was a connection with an Arya chapter? Where Arya was saying something about Darrys and saying, oh, I hope they die or something.
Yeah, Roose was supposed to, you see there, that's another red flag. Because Roose had planned to burn out the Darrys. So if that happened, that means that he did it for the Lannisters. So if their land is available now, that means that it's Roose.
But you know, even these early stages, and I'm sure even way before this point, there's all of the plans for the Red Wedding are already set in place quite clearly, because Littlefinger, he must know what the plans are at this stage.
I had that question.
Because he's basically being put in Harrenhal as a Lannister man, as the Crown's man, and
would he know though that Cat is going to be killed? Would he do that knowing Cat is going to be killed? See, I have this question written down. It's like he knows he's negotiated this treaty with the Tyrells. They have to have a plan for dealing with the Starks that's going to bring the Tyrells on board without the Freys being a threat to the Tyrells. So there has to be something.
I don't know. I don't know if he's maybe even thinking at one point, okay, I want the Riverlands. That's what I want. That's my aim. At least the first rung on the ladder of power, maybe. I don't know whether that's the extent of what he wants, but he's got it. He's got the Riverlands. And maybe at some point he's thought to himself, you know, if I can't have Cat, then a daughter.
That must be it, because I feel because she's been so observant about everything here, I think, and she's observed the Darrys, okay, she's observed that if she ever meets Arya again, you know, obviously they'll know about the Roose stuff. They know that this has been going on for a long time. I think Sansa already knows that Littlefinger is up to no good.
Yeah.
But I think we'll get answers to these questions as to how much he knew and when. I think she'll get those answers out of him if hopefully she ever is in a position to do so. We should say hello to some people here. Sunny, interesting that Sansa knows the politics of who's awarded the different honors after the Battle of Blackwater. I think it is true. I think it's really important. I think she's learning a lot of what she observes here. It really reminds me of Elizabeth, the first. You've ever seen those movies with Cate Blanchett? That she learns a lot from observing court, even though she never really ever thought of herself becoming a monarch. And I still think Sansa's my top tip for getting the throne. I think she's positioned to do that in a lot of ways. Bran says hi, just stopping in to say hello. Hi, Bran. Ian says hello. Is it R'hllor, the one you're looking for? Always. So yeah, the Dantus then and the hairnet. I completely forgot that she got this at the end of Clash. I just completely forgot. We were just saying before we started streaming that Clash is just, there's pockets of complete blankness when it came to this book. he says, he tells her that the hairnet is magic, it's justice, it's vengeance for Ned, and it's home. And it's like, wow, that's a lot being promised there.
Yeah.
And I think when we get to the Bran chapter as well, like the Bran chapter, the Sansa chapter, the Arya chapters, the Jon chapter, although that's more terrifying than anything else, those three Stark kids, they seem to be moving on with a bit more hope this time around than in game. And all the way through, I was going, George, you're a bastard. We know what you're going to do to us in Storm.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're just leaving us to all this false hope and these little adventures. Like, God damn it. But yeah. So yeah, was there anything else then that you noticed about this chapter?
No, I mean, you know, it's been announced publicly, this abomination born of incest. So if Joffrey didn't suspect or know before, then it's been announced quite loudly today. This chapter is the chapter where at the beginning, Sansa in the throne room still thinks that she has to marry Joffrey, and by the end of it, she realizes that she doesn't have to.
Is that the first time Sansa heard about the incest?
Not sure. Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
And she still doesn't know about Rickon and Bran?
No.
Okay.
No. I thought it was interesting that when Tywin assumed, you know, when he sort of took over after Joffrey had been attacked by the Iron Throne, Tywin didn't go all the way up the steps and sit on the Iron Throne as the Hand. He just sat on like one of the lower steps and sat down and said, right, okay, enough of this folly, let's get on with it. And it's like, he was actually, I mean, there was peace under Tywin.
Yeah, he also keeps the upper classes in control. I mean, Sansa says, you know, at the start of this chapter, like, I mean, they've been there for hours already, you know, making knights and doing whatever, and then there's another like 6 hours of them standing while Tywin gets everything done, you know.
Yeah.
Because at one stage it said, "Oh, will we take a break?" And Tywin, "No, let's just get this done."
Yeah.
It's like 6 hours, like everybody's just standing there, going through all this boring stuff. And
there's this thing as well of it's and this kind of links to Tyrion's chapter later on. It's easy to see, and when I first read the books, you know, right up until probably this recent reread, I was always like, yeah, I can really see why Tyrion's so pissed off with everyone about, oh, Tywin's the savior. Tywin came swooping in and saved everybody, and you know, and it was like, as a reader, particularly when you read this story the first time, you're kind of like, that's so unfair because Tyrion did this, and this, and it's like, I don't know, I feel differently about it this time. I do feel like I can see why Tyrion's pissed off, and it's easy to see why he is, but I don't feel so much. I don't feel as though I'm on Tyrion's side as much as I usually am when I'm.
Do you think season 7 has done that to us?
I don't know, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
When we get to the Tyrion chapter, we'll probably talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, Tyrion had a really bad PR problem, and he didn't really do anything about it going into the battle.
Yeah.
He didn't try to do anything about it. Like Tywin, you know, people may be afraid of Tywin, but nobody will ever disrespect him. And yeah, ruling through fear is scary, but I mean, allowing the people to call you the misshapen little monkey man or whatever they were calling Tyrion, that's not fear. Like that's not a good way to be ruling either. Like Sansa says, we'll rule through love. Cersei says, rule through fear. I mean, ideally there should be some happy middle ground, but Tyrion definitely doesn't find that.
Yeah, and it's just worth saying as well, in this chapter, some very kind of practical story progression things happen, like Loras is given a place on the King's Guard. Mace is given a place on the Small Council, and Garland comes forward. This is also kind of almost like the three heads of the Tyrells. So Loras, all three of them come forward, and they all get, you know, whatever their heart's desires. And Garland says that he wants Joffrey to take Marjorie. So obviously that's already been, you know, project planned by Cersei.
And this
and
already that nice little bit of foreshadowing with Lancel potentially losing his arm, you know, another one of Cersei's lovers being moved. So that's quite nice. Yeah. So I guess we'll move on to Theon 6. Our last Theon chapter until Dance. I don't think we get a Theon chapter in Storm. I didn't see one. I hope I'm not misremembering. But I think our next Theon chapter is a Reek chapter in Dance. So technically this is our last Theon chapter, right?
Yes, it's funny because it is Theon 6 and it's chapter 66. So it's like 666 for Theon, the number of the beast.
So dark.
It's a horrible, horrible chapter.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Man, oh man. I mean, so it starts off with Lewin attempting to convince Theon, you know, that, you know, go to the night wall, just go to the Night's Watch now. And Theon is practicing his archery, I think, when Lewin comes to him, right? And
well, he does mention it right at the beginning of the chapter. Lewin says that he serves so we're reminded by Lewin that his loyalty lies with, he's there to serve Winterfell and to serve the realm, and he's advising Theon to yield, and he starts to tell him that there is another way, and then other events take over in this chapter, and then that particular conversation is picked up much later on in the chapter, where he's doing his archery, and Lewin's just seems to have given up at this point. And he's just kind of standing there going, "You're not going to shoot me, Theon. You know, just listen to me. Let's just join the Black. You can have a decent life there. Just, you know, pull yourself together. It doesn't have to end this way." There's just
sorry, because I read this on Tuesday, so I apologize for mixing up my chronology. So the Roderick conversation happens then before Lewin, the archery scene. So the best, that's horrible.
Yeah, it is awful.
What a little shit.
I mean, the thing again about this, it kind of encapsulates how I feel about Theon. He's clear that if you get into Theon's mindset, everything for him at the moment is about image and title and what he thinks he's entitled to and how he thinks he's been treated in the past. He's even really... He's kind of exaggerating him and convincing himself that, yes, it was despicable that I was here as a hostage. It was, you know, I'm here to take what's rightfully mine. I am the Prince of Winterfell, and you can see him trying to convince himself of this. But then later on in the chapter, you really get the sense that he realizes that he's doomed, he's lost, and just the feeling of terror that he has is it's palpable. You know, you can really feel it in this chapter. But he does, after that conversation with Cassell, he does contemplate pretty seriously joining the Black. You know, he mulls it over in his mind. I didn't think I knew that Lewin had suggested this to him, but I didn't think that he had I didn't think that he'd taken it on board quite as favourably as he did. But, you know, I mean, what if Theon had joined the Night's Watch?
He would have been invaluable. I mean, people still think that Theon will go to the wall. Some people still have that theory because they will need an archer, but he doesn't have fingers. Most of his fingers are gone now, right? So I don't think that's possible. I kind of like the idea of him wanting to go to the wall and potentially you know, trying to better Jon up there. Like we watched Thor Ragnarok last night, And he really does remind me a bit like of Loki. And, you know, that kind of, somewhere in him, he wants to do the right thing, you know. Sometimes he could surprise people and do the right thing. But most of the time he just wants to do what he wants to do. And that thing where he does say to Lewin, you know, I was a prisoner here, and you know, that was painful. And then he thinks, you know, I'd never really registered that pain before. And I wonder, is that pain though aimed at the Starks or aimed at his father, who used him as allowed him to be used as a bargaining chip? Potentially. Ian says he can be an archer trainer at the wall. Yeah, that's true. Actually, he could. I feel Theon dies here. I think this is Theon dying. I am not hopeful of him making it back. I think the show might be leading us down the garden path. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to be wrong. But at the end, when, you know, the last thing he sees is Smiler, his horse, on fire. I mean, just the symbolism of that is, you know, this great war horse that he called Smiler, and he was always known for grinning, and, you know, it's just the symbolism of that. I think it's hard to overlook that as being, you know, I don't think he'll ever be right.
There's a part in this chapter as well, given that he's Ironborn, where Theon says he feels like he's drowning with all this going on.
Yeah.
Weck saves his embarrassment a little bit by stepping forward when he's asking, you know, when he gathers his 17 men together. But just that feeling when it's very important to Theon about image. So this would be excruciating for him, the embarrassment that he feels when nobody steps forward for him. And he describes that feeling as feeling like he's drowning. And I think you could be right. I think that's precisely the moment that Theon Greyjoy expired.
I think so, yeah. And let's talk about Ramsay. Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about setting up, like, coming off Joffrey, and like this, you know, the idea that Sansa's so happy she doesn't have to marry him, and there's like a momentary respite, literally the turning of the page, until George introduces one of the biggest monsters, maybe even the biggest monster. In I certainly think he's up there.
Yeah.
It's, you know, if you had to choose Mountain, Joffrey, Ramsay, I mean, Joffrey doesn't even do most of his own killing, so it's really between Ramsay and the Mountain for me. But yeah, he kills Roderick, Cassell, and Tallheart, and I can't read my writing. Who else does he kill? Oh, he kills somebody else. But he basically, he turns up with a couple of hundred guys. Roderick has 2,000 men. He turns up with a couple of hundred guys and says, yeah, we're from the Boltons, we're from the Dreadfort, we're here to help. And literally starts stabbing them in the back.
At that point, why doesn't somebody send a raven to clearly the Boltons have already defied the North way before the Red Wedding, and this is all quite clear. I mean, clearly this is all taking place, and the characters don't know what's happening. You know, the characters that we're following, the point of views that we're, you know, the Starks don't realise what's happening. They don't realise what's going on, but we do. It's quite clear that the Boltons have already defied the Starks, and I know, isn't it later on in the story where Roose is quite vague about it, and he's kind of saying, "Oh, my bastard has taken."
Yeah.
But he makes it sound as though he's holding it for Rob, and actually that's, you know.
Lewin is probably the only one who could send a raven.
But the truth of what happened, that stabbing them in the back, and, you know, murdering those 2,000 Northmen, and Cassell and all of the remaining Ironborn that were inside the walls.
And to burn Winterfell, like, what is the purpose of that? It's just, is it just to set up Bran's chapter at the end? It just seems so pointless. And it also seems quite a risky move to take, because is that not sending a big message to Robb? Like, that kind of news surely will get back to Robb very quickly, and the rest of the North. So I'm not sure if that's a
it's just
hole or
yeah.
I don't know. Ramsay says burn it all, similar to the Mad King.
He does burn them all. So it is. So yeah, he is a mad bastard. But exactly, he's a horrible character. But yeah, I kind of. I mean, we start to feel a bit more. Some of us start to feel a bit more sympathy for Theon. Some of us feel that he gets what he deserves. But I mean, we're not going to see him for quite a while now.
No.
Yeah.
And it is horrible. The horse certainly doesn't deserve that.
No.
And another big red flag is that Ramsay, of all the people there, he saves the Freys. So it's clear.
Oh yeah, obviously. Yeah.
Ruth knows what's going on. So that's it then for Theon for a while. And we'll be coming back to the Burden of Winterfell again in the Bran chapter.
Yeah.
So then we wake up with Tyrion. Tyrion 15. He had by far the most chapters in Clash. Almost twice as many as the next nearest person. Maybe Arya, actually. No, Arya nearly had 10. Yeah, Arya had 10. So not quite twice as many. I can't do math. So Tyrion 15. And what I really noticed about Tyrion 15 is that it really changes direction. Like, this is completely different to anything we've ever had from Tyrion before. The arrogance is completely gone. And it's kind of scary because
he's frightened to death of Mandan.
Yeah. And he's just stripped away completely, and you're like, Jesus, is this really Tyrion? So yeah, and he seems to be trapped in this cycle of pain, death, and decay and loss, and it's like, I was out shopping the other day, and this chapter for some reason just kept going round and round in my head. I don't know why, because I was shopping. But the Taisha stuff, I was like, this is so weird. The Taisha stuff doesn't sit right with me, because the way he describes it is, it's as if they have, he has this dream about Taisha, and the way he describes it, it's as if they have like habits built up over time between them, but that can't be possible, right?
Didn't he live with her for? It felt like an extended weekend, and then
that's what the story sounds like.
Yeah, well, this sounds like they've lived together for quite a while as man and wife.
I couldn't tell if this was memory or dream.
He has 3 dreams in this chapter. Tyrion, falling in and out of, sickness and milk of the poppy, and then finally he says no more at the end of the chapter, where he kind of, and I mean, I don't know if his wounds would have healed any better if he'd have just done what the Maester said and just let them heal. But clearly that didn't happen. But he has 3 dreams. The first dream he has, where it's just carnage everywhere. There's no colour. He looks around and thinks this is all his work. So he sees like the after effects of the battle and of the war. And he also sees the Silent Sisters and references the Silent Sisters and their work and what they do a few times, and immediately then starts thinking about his mother. So again, that huge connection of Joanna Lannister and the Silent Sisters. Did she become a Silent Sister? If so, why? How? Did Tywin know? His grief was massive. Tywin's grief was enormous. So maybe that was more than just because she died. Maybe there was something else that happened there. It's funny that again, talking about Tyrion and what we think of Tyrion, and how this time in this reread, I think both of us feel that Tyrion is very much a Lannister. And in this chapter, again, he declares, I must be a lion, I must live a lion, I must die a lion. And if that doesn't, you know, in his kind of in and out dream state, doesn't tell us that he is, you know, I think he is Lannister through and through. Okay.
So do I, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyone who thinks that Tyrion is going to be loyal to anyone but Lannister, you're sorely mistaken. You're backing the wrong horse there, I think. He's backing the wrong line. We've some comments here. Sunny says, so sad Tyrion is still calling for Tysha and his mother. Yeah, definitely. Ian says, maybe Tyrion created his own Tysha fanfic as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. You know, it's a little bit like Robert with Lyanna, that over-embellished memory of love and romance. And yeah.
Is that yeah, again, I know you don't want to, I definitely don't want to be the one to play the all-seeing eye card too much, but is there a reason why certain people like Robert and Tyrion have to keep dreaming about these women? Is there a reason why these women have to stay alive? I don't think he mentioned Shay at all in this chapter. I don't think he did.
No, he doesn't. Well, yes, he does. He does. He shouts for Jaime first when he after the first dream and before the second dream, he wakes up and remembers Mandan Moore. That it is kind of like the reality is coming back to him, and it's a bit clearer each time. And he immediately gets terrified when he thinks of Samandon, and he shouts for Jaime first, and then he shouts for Shay, then his mother, and then Tysha. So he and that's before he's given milk of the poppy, and then he has his second dream. And in that dream again, in a second reference to Shay, where he dreams that he's knighted by Jaime and that he's a hero at a feast, and Shay is waiting for him, and Tywin's smiling, and you know, it's this second dream is all about Tyrion wanting to be the hero and saves the day, and everyone loves him, and you know, everyone accepts him, and his father accepts him, and you know,
we've got a bit of crackpot from Ion. Joanna's soul is living in the weirwood cave at the rock. That's how she reached out to Sir Jaime and gave him the weirwood stump dream. Interesting. You see, I'm not sure the dream that Tyrion has where he can see the aftermath of the battle, I read that as him being trapped with all the other bodies for a while, because they don't find him for a while. He's with everybody else that's been brought in, all the other injured people. So I thought, well, maybe that's just kind of part flashback being with those people, you know.
Yeah, maybe.
But no, I mean, the Tysha stuff though, I'm a bit confused. I don't know if he's been entirely honest about that situation, and of course it's the thing that will drive the biggest rift between him and Jaime later. But the Mandan Moore stuff is interesting as well, because he is genuinely afraid, but he uses it. He decides, no, I need to look at this now. I need to look at him, and I do like that about Tyrion, that he doesn't shy away. He's like, no, this is gonna make me stronger. I'm not gonna. It's very unlike Bran, who isn't allowed to look at Jaime, being the one that pushed him.
I don't know what you mean about the Tytos stuff. Have I missed something?
What did I say? Tysha, I said.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Titus, as in Tywin's father. But,
sorry, Tysha, sorry.
Yeah, well, that's exactly, that is the third dream that Tywin has in this chapter, is that he's in the cottage with Tysha, and that she tells him that she loves him every night, which again, you know, alludes to him being there for a long time. And then he snaps out of that by thinking that it's all lies and it was all for gold. But again, like you say, it clearly haunts him, whether in his dream state or in his waking state.
It's just interesting that he dreams about her having spent so much more time with Shay at this stage. He's been with Shay for over a year now. And so I have a question about Shay. Do you think she's already with Tywin at this stage?
Yeah.
So do I. Yeah. And you don't really know how much time has passed. It's probably only about a week or so, is it?
Well, she's been the handmaid for Lollis for a while now, I think, hasn't she?
Yeah, because
seems that way
about her,
yeah. So
actually, Lawless is a good one to watch because her pregnancy will give us good timing for yeah, the Mandan Moore stuff then, like later on in Sword. So he when he calls in Pod, he basically says to Pod, and it's interesting the way he's already thinking this is Cersei's work, and I can't trust anybody. But when he calls in Pod, he basically makes Pod swear that he won't tell anybody about what Mandan did.
Yes,
which is, and he remembers, Jaime warning him about Mandan like he did the last time. And later on, Mandan will be held up as a bit of a hero. And Jaime will question why it hasn't been written up and all that kind of thing. This heroism. And it kind of, the like that kind of idea that history is very suspect, especially when it comes to the Lannisters.
Yeah.
And that Mandan Moore thing comes up a few times. So it'll come up a few times in Storm, if memory serves me correct. And it just it kind of struck me here, just with the Taisha stuff and the Joanna stuff. Now that you've said it as well, like history is very suspect with the Lannisters.
Yes.
And, yeah, especially and obviously the Shay stuff as well when we find that out later on. So
well, everything about these books makes you well, if you haven't questioned already, then certainly you will. That how battles are referenced and singers and songs and heroes and knights and vows, and it's not all is as it appears.
So this marks a very different Tyrion coming on the horizon, the beginnings of a very dark Tyrion. And he won't see, he'll be kind of out, he'll be out with the in crowd, if that makes any sense, for a while. Like he won't see a lot of his mates for a good while now. And he's lost his power base, so that's a big thing going into Storm for Tyrion. Just as Sansa gets back something, to the strongest figures in this book, Tyrion and Theon, they've lost ground completely.
And on a very vain Lannister kind of, golden child level, he is devastated that this is that the scar and the mess that it's made of his face, and he thinks very, this has got to have something to do with him becoming very bitter.
Yeah.
So this is Tyrion waking up from the battle, realizing that he's not the Hand of the King anymore, and it's a huge reality check for him. In the TV show, they played on this much more, with Varys being there and Shay turning up and not him not wanting to look in the mirror and her saying that she still loved him anyway, and
the scar isn't even nearly as bad as it was. He basically loses his nose.
Yeah.
So it's pretty horrific. So then we go from Tyrion to Jon. And I think it's a while since they piggybacked chapters with Jon and Tyrion. That happened a lot more in game, I feel. So Jon anyway turns up. This is Jon 8. Not that many Jon chapters actually. And he's with Corran. I love Corran. I wish he was around for a
He's
bit
cool,
more.
isn't he? He's a dude. Yeah.
Total dude. And Corran sends back the other fellow. What's the other fellow called?
Well, he sends.
He sends him to
Eben.
Yes.
He sends Eben, doesn't he? Yeah. Who doesn't make it? Yeah.
To tell them, to tell them that of what Jon has seen, which is interesting that he's basically his intention was to out Jon as a warg, or well, we've talked about maybe potentially Mormont knowing more about Jon's lineage.
Well, yeah, he must do. Yeah. He must do, because Corryn's saying to tell. Well, this is interesting because he sends Eben first. Eben doesn't make it, clearly, because we see his head at the end. But he also sends. Stone Snake, who lost his Stone Snake lost his horse with the Shadowcat incident, and Corryn tells Stone Snake to go back and tell Mormont about the eagle watching them, and that the trees have eyes again, and that, you know, that everything, that the giants have awakened, that, you know, there's this marauding horde coming towards, and like, be ready for it. So there's a presumption there that Mormont must know that this is something to do with like the old ways, the old gods, the old, you know, something's risen again, this old power that's come back.
Is it a presumption or an overestimation of what Mormont knows?
Because maybe.
I mean, we talked.
Or maybe it's just a complete wake-up call for Mormont. Who knows?
Like we talked a lot about the absolute craziness, the insanity of Mormont taking so many people from the wall, so many good people from the wall. I mean, it's going to be the prologue of Storm, the questioning of Mormont's decision making, basically. I mean, if he knows that there's a potential for all these old things to be woken up again, and I mean, he must know that, because I mean, if he has any inkling that that's even possible, he would never have left the wall, because he saw the White Walkers, or he saw the White. So why like leave? Like, so I just wonder, is Corryn overestimating Mormont there? I'm not sure.
Yeah. But my question is, does Stone Snake, we know that Eben doesn't make it, but does Stone Snake make it?
I don't know.
Maybe we'll find out. Yeah. Maybe we'll find out in the next one.
Corryn says, Sonny said, Corryn says to add horse blood to porridge. Why? Is similar to what Bran eats. Probably just good protein. So what the Dothraki do as well, they bleed the horses, but they don't. It's just kind of like the Mongols used to do it as well. When you're out and about and you don't have meat, just bleeding.
Yeah, it is whether or not there's anything similar there to like blood sacrifice. Bran eating some kind of bloody mixture that kind of opens his third eye type of thing. Maybe that's what Corryn is trying to do, get some sort of way of getting them to open the third eye, and maybe he feels that will give them some sort of magical advantage.
It's so sad that we only have him for like what, 3 chapters?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It is. So we have this scene where everyone else peels away or is sent back by Corryn, and ultimately we're just left with Corryn and Jon. And Jon says this infamous line, "Is your sword sharp?" And he makes them both say the vows again. Is there anything at this stage, listening to the vows again in this chapter, that jumped out at you as you know, the reason that they said it? I mean, obviously he's given him a mission here, and he's telling him that he commands him to join the wildlings and pretend that he's breaking his oath, but he's really not breaking his oath. But just that, hearing the words of the vow again.
Yeah, to guard the realms of men. I mean, he's already had this brush with Ygritte, and I think it will make Jon question what that means, because there's men north of the wall as well. Like, don't they deserve to be guarded too? And since taking the vow, he has seen something that's not a man, that's not a human. So isn't there a duty to protect all humans from these things? And I think that'll stick with Jon.
Well, I think this might be the chapter where a lot of theories spring up about the wall or the watch itself being Azor Ahai. or being Lightbringer, should I say? And the what stuck out to me was we are the sword in the darkness, the light that brings the dawn. And Corin talks about that if the wall falls, all the fires will go out, which is epic. I mean, that's like a real, if the wall shall fall, well, that's it, game over. I mean, we know if we look back to the TV show, and I know there's only one season left, but the wall's fallen in the TV show. But yeah, I can see where people would create this theory that, I mean, that's quite clear, isn't it? The sword in the darkness, the light that brings the dawn, that the wall itself is Lightbringer, or the Night's Watch, the Brotherhood.
And they could be bringing dawn in the form of Jon Snow. Yeah, I just looked up Stone Snake there. He goes missing, and Jon remembers that he's still missing when he goes over the wall in Storm.
Right.
So he thinks about him still being missing.
So that's now. So that's
been mentioned since.
Benjen, Stonecross. There are a few people that have just mysteriously vanished.
Yeah.
That we don't hear from. I don't know.
Do they burn Corin?
Yes, they do.
Yeah. And why do you think Ghost attacks him? Like, is that Jon's? Like, I know why Jon, because they're in a fight or whatever. But is that Jon subconsciously attacking him as well? Or we talked a little bit this last week about their connection. Is that like Jon like trying to be brave through Ghost?
Yeah,
and doing
maybe.
What he doesn't want to do, or is it just Ghost naturally defending Jon?
I think probably more the latter. But I mean, even so, it doesn't seem to stop Corin just going for it. It's so sad. I mean, he knew when the bit where I was just reading in this chapter about the he's telling Jon to join them and just watch and observe and find out what they're looking for in the Frostfangs. And at the end of this chapter, Ygritte says that there's nothing further in the north for them, and obviously this is a mystery that Jon needs to find out a bit more about now. Which in the books is quite simple. They were looking for giants, or they were looking for the horn of Joramund and couldn't find it. So they're now marching on the wall. But the bit where it describes basically, where they arrive at the position where they're taking the stand against the wildlings, just Jon and Corin, and it's the stream and the waterfall. It just sounds like a real mini oasis in the middle of everything that's happening. And it's, Corin knew what was going to be happening here, but he also knew that he was going to die, but it's kind of like he also chose the place that was going to happen.
Yeah.
He must have just kind of imagined how this was all going to go down in his mind.
Do you think he may have seen it?
Maybe. Yeah.
He seems to be quite in tune with magical elements.
Well, Jon questions him, doesn't he? Says, have you been here before? And Corin says that he's heard somebody talk about it. It could be that he's dreamed it. Maybe he's a bit like Jojen.
Because he says he'll tell Mormont, what happened, but you get the sense that he knows he's never going to be able to tell Mormont.
Yeah. I didn't really break my oath. I'm not, I'm just doing this because you're asking me to. It's tragic.
It is. And then, I like the way it more or less ends with Ygritte telling Jon that the eagle is Orell, the guy that he killed. And it leads nicely then into the wolf dream in Bran's chapter, that because Game of Thrones ends with the biggest magical event in the series so far. with the birth of the dragons, but there's so little of them in this book, really. Like, there's very little Dany. So the fact that Warging kind of and Greensight take over as, like, you know, these are big, this is a big magical feature that you need to pay attention to, suggests that it's going to be important in relation to the dragons as well. This ability to warg birds and wolves and then potentially people.
There's hi Barbara. Barbara's in the comments. She's asking, well, she said the fire imagery in this chapter where Jon makes the fire and he's like, he almost likens the fire to sex, where it's like it's the satisfaction of it warming his hands, and he thinks about, would a maiden's kiss ever be as great? And Barbara's saying that the fire imagery about the maidens dancing was very similar to what Sir Axel saw in the Davos chapter. Yeah, there's, I mean, there's lots of, I think there's quite a lot of fire imagery and blood. There's a lot of fire and blood in these chapters. There's the, what am I thinking? There's all, you know, Tyrion and his injuries and his scars and him thinking about the carnage. There's later on in the next chapter where Summer is thinking about fire and that there was never a smell so dangerous as fire. Well, yeah, you know, you're not kidding. But there's a lot that in Jon's chapter here, we get mention of fire again. So there's quite a lot of fire and blood in these last few chapters. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, Sonny asks, Jon is often flexes his fingers. What does that have another meaning? Well, it's the fingers that he injured in A Game of Thrones with the fire. So it does show that he isn't fireproof. And it probably the cold doesn't really help that, but he does tolerate the cold better than other people. So he's not necessarily cold proof, but he can certainly tolerate both, maybe to a higher degree, like fire and ice.
I don't know if it has another meaning beyond just him.
So. I think it's just
physiotherapy.
His injury, yeah. His injury, his arthritis is playing up. But it does strike me that Jon crosses so many boundaries as a character, more than most. I mean, Tyrion maybe, but he's a very liminal character. He just crosses those kind of thresholds all the time. Not just between like life and death, but just other worlds. Like, this is a massive crossing between, to go from being, you know, treated pretty much like a lord, except from Cat, to go to being, you know, a crow, then to go to being like and now a wildling. He's always crossing.
But not only a wildling, a disgraced crow who's broken his oath, and you know, he's having to say to Rattleshirt, "I'll do whatever you want. I'll do whatever you ask." And he grit stepping in and saving him.
It is very like Ned. You know, he has to burn his bridges to keep promises. You know, he just have to chip away at his own character a bit. Like, he has to kind of deny the Stark identity to be taken serious as a crow, you know, and when he's told in a game, you know, a Game of Thrones, that, you know, they're his brothers and he needs to start treating them like his brothers and stop acting like he's entitled. And the same thing happens kind of here with well, it will happen in Storm, I guess, with the wildlings. You know, he'll start to feel sorry for them.
There's a couple of things before the fight and before the stand in the Stony Pass, is when Mance is explaining that he needs to break his oath and that he wants him to join the wildlings, and he talks, basically he talks about, there's a reference to Mance again, like Mance did, and he broke his oath and joined the wildlings, and like Mance, you'll have to. And it's again this another similarity to Mance, another reference to Jon doing something that Mance has done previously. I really like this idea that Mance is another, as you know, there has been another Stark bastard who's joined the Wall, and maybe all Stark bastards join the Wall, and that Mance was previously like maybe one of Rickard's brothers or whatever, you know, a Stark bastard that was just ousted and then ended up, whether he knows it or not, but there does seem to be this big connection. I mean, in the next chapter, I'll just mention it here before I forget, when they're talking about the old kings that have done terrible things in Winterfell, the old Stark kings, and there's a reference to somebody called Edric the Snowbeard, and I just thought that sounds like a wildling to me. There's a lot of crossover between Starks, I think, interbreeding or bastards being sent over the Wall. And I think that, you know, I really like this idea that Mance is a Stark bastard, just like Jon. And that's the connection between them.
Well, would it be a bit of a stretch to suggest that Benjen might be, and that there was some sort of cover up there?
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, that's still a massive question as to why did Benjen go to the Wall?
Yeah.
I mean, I still think it has something to do with Jon, though. I think it's something to do with, we're going to have to send this bastard, like you're saying, if all of the Stark bastards have to go, we're going to have to send this bastard to the Wall, but this bastard is also a Targaryen.
Yes, yeah.
So we need you there, Benjen.
Ooh.
And Mormont decides, okay, well, I'll need to be there as well. Like there may be your Illuminati conspiracy. There might be a few conspiracies.
There's also, before the fight, the other thing that happens is Corryn takes the first watch and Jon falls asleep with Ghost and has a dream. It's a very quick reference to this dream that he has with burning castles and dead men rising unquiet from their graves. So this can only be a reference to the Winterfell crypts. Yeah. And this is something that's referenced again very heavily in the next chapter.
Do you think that those dead men are Rickon and Bran then?
Burning castles and dead men rising unquiet from the graves is exactly what happens in the next chapter, but that also could be a reference to the old Stark Kings of Winter that are in the crypts. I mean, there are things that happen in the next chapter that link to this, but he does have this dream, and then they have the fight. I don't know if there's anything that you want to say about this last bit of the chapter where the fight takes place, and then Jon effectively, you know, Ygritte defends him and keeps him alive. The only thing that I will say is, I thought that, again, similar to the comparison between Daenerys and Sansa, I thought there was a great kind of comparison here between Corryn Halfhand and Jaime. The story of Corryn and how he mastered his sword fighting skills with his other hand is all part of his legend, and how amazing Corryn Halfhand is. And it's just that kind of, he overcame the fact, you know, I mean, it's kind of like half hand versus golden hand. So Corryn and Jaime both had the same injury, but Corryn used that to, you know, that's what he ended up becoming a legend for and famous for. And he had all these, like, you know, biting left cuts with his other sword hand. So I thought that was quite interesting. But that's the only, and Rattleshirt is just hideous.
So yeah, although I have to say, do you not think the wildlings, they're not nearly as uncivilized as we've been made believe? I mean, compared to some characters we've met south of the Wall, they're positively posh. But yeah, so can I ask a question? I don't know if anyone has the answer to this. But if you're killed with Valyrian steel, can you be whited?
I would have thought not. I would have thought that takes away.
Because when Corran asks him, I wonder, is that part of why he's asking as well, maybe?
Maybe. I would have thought that it would prevent you from becoming a white, because it's like one element of magic fighting, you know, defeating another. So
like it's like an inoculation.
Yeah.
It's just something that I just wonder, will it come up? But
I think you're right, though. I think maybe they're not as kind of barbaric and savage as people would have us believe with the tales and the legends and things. I think it's maybe just that, I mean, we might see it as refreshing that, okay, well, you know, a woman can stand and have a say and argue a case, and things are done very differently here, and this is how the wildlings operate. And Jon observes that, well, you know, things are done very differently here. And but to us, that's probably quite, you know, that's quite refreshing. But to somebody like Jon, that's just bizarre that a woman can come forward and you know and actually mount a defense and actually persuade this leader that, you know, it's crazy. It's a completely different system of doing things, and it possibly could be seen as really savage.
Yeah, because I don't think, like, had Jon been born to a wildling, like as a bastard in wildlings, he would have had a very different experience. And there has to be something attractive to bring someone like Mance across to that kind of lifestyle, and to keep people there as well. Like, so, like when you're dealing with Osha, especially in the next chapter, and she's so angry about what Theon has done, and it's the barbarism of it really hits her. It's like, how, like, I think we get a very negative view of the wildlings, and I don't think it's justified. I think there's obviously a complex structure there, and there's, just because they don't build cities and live in castles.
I mean, is the practice of coming in, like, I can't remember what they call it, but it's kind of like coming and stealing a woman from you know, from the village or whatever, and then taking her, and then that's it. She's yours. She belongs to you. Is that any more or less barbaric than the whole practice of, like, first night, you know, with the weddings and lots of other hideous barbaric practices that happen in, like, the civilized, you know, kingdom beyond the wall?
It's kind of like Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
It is a little bit, yeah. It's I remember thinking, actually, it's a little bit like there's very popular a few years ago doing, like, reality documentaries about travelers and gypsies and their lives, like My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding and things like that. And the practice of, I think they call it grabbing.
Yes.
Where it's just like grabbing a girl, and then that's like, you know, that's it. That's like, they're yours now. That's your girlfriend, and you're together.
In Sansa's chapter, that bullshit story about Marjorie has come to love his grace from afar. Like,
yeah.
I mean, there's obviously downsides to it, but I think I think you're right. I think there's way more interbreeding, not just like the grabbing of wives or girls or whatever. There's definitely more like consensual interbreeding than we think. And even that story of Bael the Bard, I mean, it breaks the Stark, the girl that has the Stark girl that has Bael's child. It breaks her heart that what happens between her child.
The father and the son. Yeah.
So so I think there's a lot more to them, and I'm looking forward to that part in Storm. Actually, I'm looking forward to being more north again. So then we move on to Bran. So
last chapter.
I know you have a lot to say about Bran 7. So I'm gonna let you take it away.
Well, this is the chapter where we find out we've got the 6 fugitives hiding out in the crypts. The first thing that I think this chapter is laden with symbolism and foreshadowing and all sorts of potential things that could be happening in the story on a bigger level. It is kind of, this is one of those chapters where, you know, how I think there's a quote somewhere from George R.R. Martin about all the answers to the whole story are in Game of Thrones or in the first book, and it's like, yeah, probably. I'm not disputing that, but even though this is in Clash of Kings, I think this is one of those Bran chapters that really taps into that kind of, you know, here are all the answers if you only know how to read it and only know how to find them. All sorts of stuff going on down here in the crypts. This notion of the darkness, the black, like within this chapter, we also get Bran who walks into summer right at the very beginning of the chapter, and we don't find out until a little bit later on that he's actually been walking summer for the last 3 days, which to me that read as though he would been inside summer and feeling that he was sustaining himself, because Jojen had to point out, no, the wolf ate, you didn't eat, but that this had been for 3 days, which I found amazing. I was astonished by that had happened for so long. Within this, we get all sorts of things here from Summer's perspective. So he's able to walk into Summer and Shaggy Dog, who are wandering around the remnants of Winterfell with all these like pines and ashes, the smell of burnt meat, men and horses. And very, very briefly, Summer he looks up in the sky and sees out of the fire this great winged snake, and that the roar was a river of flame in the sky, and then it disappeared very quickly. That can only be a dragon. And there's Summer talking about, as I mentioned before, the smell of fire being more, you know, there's nothing more dangerous than the smell of fire. But this dark place that the direwolves feel that they're being dragged towards, but they're resisting against it. Is that the connection between the boys and the wolves are fighting against it? So it's almost like they know they're connected to these boys, but they don't want to be. And there is something a little bit sinister about, in Jon's previous chapter, just going back to that for a second, the eagle in Jon's chapter, it just really made me think, you know what, wargs do seem, I know they've got a bad name, but also they do seem really creepy and like very sly, the tactics that they're, you know, the fact that this eagle is following them around, it's really just creepy that it's able to do that. And it's almost, it's like a move that's almost craven in a way, having that ability, being able to overtake somebody. What are you laughing at? Something else. Okay. You know, just that ability of being able to be a warg just seems very creepy and sinister.
It is kind of weird, but don't we learn later on that if you stay too long and if you're trapped within your animal, that you'll lose yourself over time? We learned that later.
Yes, but 3 days is a long time.
So if the wolf is afraid of being dragged down, maybe Bran has the ability, unlike other wargs, to actually completely take over.
That's what it feels like. It feels like whether we're being pulled, and then you get that quote of a darkness, black and still, black and cold, black and dead. And then later on in this chapter, Bran describes the darkness in the crypts as being comforting, so that you put your hand out in front of you and you can't even see your own hand. There's a safety about that, because if you can't even see where you are, how is anybody going to be able to find you? And it just kind of made me think about that whole concept of the darkness and the crypts and the direwolves fighting against it and Bran being comforted by it, that the darkness is this, in Mel's mind, it's like the concept of the great other, which again in her mind is a bad thing. That's the, you've got the Lord of Light and then you've got the great other. And what the direwolves and what Bran is describing in this chapter kind of feels like that, the power of the great other, the darkness having some pull, some magic, some power.
Bran's physical form, him as a human being, has no pull other than the people that are around him. Like, he does not want to be in his physical form, unlike Orell, or even Jon, potentially Arya, Rickon. Like, they can still find pleasure in their physical form, where Bran can't. He can't express himself like that. So it probably adds to his strength that he's not fixed physically to his his ego isn't physically fixed to his body, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that would really make sense that he's being pulled to that.
And there's, I mean, the direwolves, well, just some are in particular describing the crypts as a house of whispers where all men were blind. And Bran thinks about men being blind it equates to because they haven't opened their third eyes. So is that what the direwolves mean? That the crypts are full of old Stark kings who had the ability to open their eyes, but they were all blind. And at some point, will they be able to have the ability to open their third eyes and somehow... I mean, just again, linking back to in Jon's chapter, this very brief dream that he has of men awakening from their graves. And then you get Bran talking about the old kings. Some of them have done terrible things. And I think there's a significance as well that they take the swords that they take are from the graves of Ned. They take 3 swords. And they're from the graves of Ned, Ned's father, Rickard, and Brandon. I can't remember which Brandon it is, but it's a Brandon. So Ned, Rickard, and Brandon's swords are taken.
Brandon, probably Uncle Brandon, because he'd be in that area with them. But was it? I can't remember.
It could be an ancient Brandon. It could be like, the Brandon the Builder, or Bran. There's a Bran, our Bran in the story reels through a whole roster of names of old Stark kings. But there's lots of reference to this. Later on in this chapter, where is it?
My favorite, by the way, is Osha taking a piss on one of the king's foot.
Yeah. There's it when they light a fire in the crypts, and the reflection in the fire. Bran says it looked like the dead were rising. That links neatly, very directly to what Jon's dream was, that the dead were rising, unquiet from their graves.
Sonny asks, while you're talking about that there, hi Connie. Sonny says, any thoughts on Mira? Has Eddard's tomb sword? She had Rickard's, but it was too heavy.
I don't know. I just think it's significant that it is Ned, Rickard, and Brandon. because to me the significance is the swords are supposed to hold the spirits in the graves, aren't they?
Yeah, and they're not like, they're just ordinary metal as well. It's not like Valyrian or anything.
No, it's a symbolic thing. But removing those swords from the graves, considering we have all these other unknown things, like there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, and the fact that it's built on these hot springs, and there's just lots of unanswered things about Winterfell itself. But the last 2 chapters culminating in this book, there's a ton of references to the graves of the old Stark kings and them rising from the graves, and they've removed these swords that are supposed to be keeping them in the graves. Now, I'm not saying that there's going to be like Jason and the Argonauts where they rise up from the graves with, like, you know, skeletons that attack the Boltons later on in, you know, Dream of Spring or whatever. But I think it means that some magic that's related to the old gods is going to emerge in the next book. And I think there's lots of symbolism for that in this chapter. I've always kind of gone, yeah, well, you know, I don't really get that. I don't understand what would be the significance of, like, the old kings of winter just, you know, rising up from the crypts. But it seems to be very heavily foreshadowed in these chapters.
Too. Also, there's who put the stone in front of the crypts? Do you think?
Oh yeah, because there was Hodor trying to get. Yeah,
definitely seems as if it's deliberately placed. So, do you think that's Luwin?
Maybe. I mean, good God, Luwin. I mean, we'll get to him in a second. But
and just when you mentioned the winged snake, which I think is prophetic, it did make me wonder, where did the comet go? Did we nobody ever comments on it being gone? Or nobody misses it, do they?
Do you think that's what it was? Do you think it was the comet?
No, it just made me think of the comet. Maybe it was the comet. But no, I don't think it is the comet. But we haven't, it just kind of dropped off. It dropped out of the story.
It did. Yeah, it did. Nobody either it's there and nobody talks about it anymore, or it just
because Dany was following it at one stage. Now it just seems to be gone. Connie says John flexes his fingers because Eamon told him to. It helps with the stiffening up.
Yes, yeah. It's kind of like a physiotherapy thing.
And Barbara wants to know, where do you think Ned's bones will end up? Good question. We were asking that a few weeks ago, Barbara.
Yeah, they'd been sent back up north, hadn't they, with the Silent Sisters? But
Sonny thinks that the stones came from the tower that fell in front of the crypts.
Yeah, maybe.
But it felt as if it was too coincidental that it was blocking the door. And that if that's true, that there's a lot of that they probably wouldn't. It felt to me like somebody doesn't want the Boltons to get in and destroy the crypts. That's what it felt like to me. That, or it could be, you know, that Winterfell itself is protecting the crypts.
Yeah.
And the gods would go kind of on, like the Boltons don't do much damage to the gods would either. So I guess so that would be kind of expected. So
just going on from what you're saying though, and I know this probably sounds really weird and it's really difficult to try and kind of explain this, but I was interested at the beginning of this chapter when Bran is clearly walking into Summer. Summer seems to use more sophisticated words this time from the point of view, so talking about ashes and pine and burnt meat, still referencing words like man rock and winged snake and things like that, but the description seems a lot more human and a bit more sophisticated than the previous Bran warging Summer, which makes me think, and this is really out there and really kind of wacky, but it does feel as though Winterfell itself is a character, is a personality, and it just is Bran somehow walking into Winterfell itself, and that's why there must always be a Stark at Winterfell, because there's a small bit in this chapter where Bran seems to be able to. It's when Mia is asking it, or Osha is asking him what's going on outside and what did you see? What can you see? And he seems to be able to. There's a small bit where he kind of looks through them and past them, and he's able to see what's going on in Winterfell. He sees bodies in the moat, and he can see. And I've just made a note here. Can he see this without warging? He seems to be able to just have this vision of, and it's like, is he warging Winterfell when that
there's definitely
happens?
more going on.
Yeah, it's
summer.
I think so. I think that the prior chapter, where we had very broken, clunky description of Man Rock and the weapons and I think that was Winterfell defending itself or alerting Bran to Theon and the Ironborn.
Yeah, because he does say at the end of this chapter that the stone is strong, the roots run deep.
Yes.
The kings sit in their thrones, or the kings sit below.
Yeah. Winterfell is not dead.
Nothing is dead, just broken.
Just broken, as if Winterfell is a kind of living, breathing, sentient thing.
He also wonders how he survived the fall when he sees the gargoyles smashed that fell from the same height he did. He wonders, and it is a good question. How did he survive the fall? Did Winterfell kind of save him, maybe?
When they do escape, and there's a horrible bit. I kind of only vaguely remembered this, but there's an awful bit with Hodor doing a door thing. Like, Hodor, open the door, Hodor, open the door. And it's just like, oh my God. So again, this could be a massive foreshadowing chapter for later on. We know what happened in the TV show, but if this is going to be one of those things there are like 3 things that happen in the TV show that are definitely from the books, and they've done 2 of them already. Hodor thing being apparently one of them.
Is Shireen the other one?
Oh Jesus, I hope not. I really hope not.
What's the other one then? I think it is Shireen.
Oh God.
I think it is.
I don't know. If it is, I hope they do it differently. Well, they're going to have to, because in the books they're in completely different locations. But I hope they don't do this with Stannis colluding to this at all in the books. But we'll see.
But Connie when they says it seems like Bran, when he could climb, described in detail the architecture of Winterfell, like he in a previous life he had built it.
Yeah, I think so. Totally there's some cyclical thing going on with the Brans there, I think. I wanted to ask whether or not, when they escape, there's a description of the broken tower remaining, and that everywhere else is burned, nothing remains, and like smoke coming from the lake and things like that. Is there any significance around this broken tower? The fact that the broken tower, even though it was broken, it's still as broken as it was before, and it remains kind of, it remains untouched. And I'm just wondering if there is what the significance of this broken tower is, because there seems to be a lot of action just around this one location in Winterfell. Wasn't it the broken tower that he fell from?
Yeah. That's and that's obviously where this whole thing starts, isn't it? It adds more weight to what you're saying, that maybe there's something magical in the building itself.
Yeah.
Potentially there could be roots within the walls of Winterfell.
That's true. Yeah. I mean,
like we have the theory about the wall,
Yes.
There's trees within the wall. Can we talk about the scene with Luwin and Osha, because I loved that scene.
Yeah.
So we talked about this before, the idea that Luwin is bleeding out in the Godswood, potentially for a reason. You know, he's obviously dragged himself there
a long way. That is a mission. That's not just something where you go, I need to rest up against a tree. Oh, there's a tree. He had to drag himself from. He was in basically the courtyard in Winterfell, and he had to drag himself that far. To why did he do that? Why did he end up in that location? It can only be because he did want to be left for the gods, and and you know, whether he just died there and bled out in front of the heart tree, or whether, you know, Osha quickens that for him and sacrifices him to the gods in some kind of ceremonial way, you know, again, subconsciously or not. This is what's happening. So what the hell, Maester Luwin? It seems like he wants to somehow join the Weirwoods, and that this is some revelation that Maester Luwin was, like, you know, worshipping the old gods, or I don't know. What does this mean? Was this just a last ditch attempt for him to sort of, like, you know, check whether magic does work or not? I don't know.
Well, how much, like, how much does he suspect when it comes to Bran's powers? Like, he says he basically, I knew you weren't dead. I knew they were the Miller's boys. I knew you weren't dead. So is he bleeding out there for Bran? Is he bleeding out there for them? I don't know. It's a really strange thing. And to say to Osha straight away, you got to separate them. Like, you can't. They're Rob's heirs. Also, that idea, you know, they're Rob's heirs. It's like, well, Rob is a man grown in comparison. Like, Rob will probably have children before either of them become of age. So does he suspect then, because he's already put all of it together, the Boltons are going to double cross, Rob is not coming back? Is that what he's doing there? Is that why he gets Osha to separate them? Because they're Rob's heirs, and they are going to be in charge, because Rob isn't going to make it back.
Yeah, I think he probably has figured that out in his head about what's happening there. I mean, it's a shame he didn't have time to send a raven out while he was thinking that.
To send a raven.
Yeah. But I mean, the other thing is, there's, when Jojen says there's power in living wood and power is as strong as fire, again, this reference to fire and the fact that the fire that took hold at Winterfell and seems to have ruined everything, destroyed everything, didn't manage to burn the Godswood down. And you know, this is demonstrating that there's power in the Godswood.
Angela says that the broken tower may have the White Queen buried under it, an ancient crypt.
Yeah, could be.
I mean, we don't know how far underneath Winterfell the crypts run. That's true. Sunny says it reminds me of the story of the White Queen separating the two princes. Yeah. And Barbara says, now I wonder if Wex, Theon's squire, was really in the heart tree. You would think Luwin would have seen him. I don't know.
Yeah, it's that's what we hear about that later on, when there's lots of things going on at White Harbour, and Wex says that he was hiding there in like up in the Weirwood tree, and he observed all of this. It is kind of difficult, Barbara, to believe that he wouldn't have been noted by somebody, by Luwin,
or Osha, who's got great instincts.
The thing that jumped out at me in all of this, when it seems quite insignificant, but it's Maester Luwin says, he says winter is coming, you know, and all of this is such folly. all of these fights and things like that. And it just makes me think, Maester Lewin truly knows what we want to know, which is the true meaning of winter is coming. He knows exactly what that means. Otherwise, why would he describe the silly fights between men? Why would he have dragged himself out to the weirwood tree, out into the Godswood? And why would he say winter is coming, this is all such folly, if there wasn't some kind of knowledge there, connection there? Probably the reason that he was in Winterfell in the first place, he'd placed himself there. So we can kind of assume now that Maester Lewin has gone into the roots of the tree, gone into the sort of weirwood net, if you like.
Well, I hope he gives better advice from beyond than he did in life, because I wrote that down too, that all this war is folly and winter's coming. It's like, yeah, that's great, but like, you know, your advice hasn't been great. Your track record on preparing the Starks hasn't been like it felt like his allegiance was to his chain and not to and I don't know if he just realizes too late that actually all this magic is real. And you know, I don't know, it seems a bit disappointing. Connie says, you think a wolf would have smelled him? Yeah, as in Wex. Yeah, for sure. Angela asks, is Winterfell fenced off, not just around the castle?
Well, I think there's a moat outside, and there's lots of different walls inside Winterfell. It's protected by lots of different walls. So you could say it was fenced off.
And why does Lewin have a Valyrian steel link?
Well, he would have to have studied the higher mysteries, so
and not many do. So
so he's definitely got, even though he's saying, as all Meisters are trained to say, no, that all happened a long time ago. That doesn't happen anymore. There are no children of the forest. There are no giants, and you know, they're all trained to say that. He studied those higher mysteries, so there must be at least some interest there. I think he knows what's happening. He knows what winter is coming means. He knows about Bran's abilities, and I think this is a last-ditch attempt of him to kind of go into the weirwood net to preserve his knowledge.
And it's interesting that the last time we see Lewin, correct me if I'm wrong, the last time we see Lewin in a Game of Thrones, he's in the crypts.
Yes.
And the last time we see him here, he's in the Godswood. So there's definitely, with Lewin, and there's definitely like this big conflict between magic. I mean, you know, we'd love to know more about the Maesters, but maybe they are coming from a place of good. Maybe they think we shouldn't use magic to defeat magic because maybe it hasn't worked before. Maybe you, like, can you control the kings of winter once you let them out? Like, is it a case of you're going to use a nuclear weapon against a nuclear weapon, but when you do that, you better be prepared for what you're unleashing. Like Dany with her dragons. Like, she can't control them later on. Like, they're very useful, but the fact that you have to keep feeding that weirwood with blood, I mean, what will that mean? What does that mean for the Starks? Like, and we've said this before as well, the Starks that we have now are really nice Starks. They're cuddly, they're nice, they've direwolves, they're lovely. But they weren't always like that. Most Starks aren't like that. Most Starks are more akin to the Boltons.
Yes, definitely. I just keep thinking now about Winterfell being some sort of sentient creature, because it is, you know, if you think about the old gods and the magic of the North and the First Men and their worship of like nature and you know, I mean, it was kind of different to the Children of the Forest, but similar. The Children of the Forest, didn't they kind of want them to continue to practice their religion, but link it to sort of worshipping with the weirwood trees? That's where the weirwood trees were kind of linked into it. But it wouldn't surprise me if of any of the castles, if you imagine that one of the castles in Westeros is somehow infused with that much magic. I mean, we know, like, you know, there's Storm's End and things like, you know, there does seem to be some magical element to the actual architecture, to the actual bricks and mortar of these castles.
Yeah.
But the one that you would imagine has got more than anything is related to something like that would be Winterfell. I think, you know, they're built on hot springs and...
Yeah, I mean, the Eyrie as well, there's something unnatural about the Eyrie. I mean, how did they even build it? The mystery.
Greywater Watch, the fact that it physically, the location of it moves, there's definitely something magical about the castles, about the physical.
I mean, you know, we also have the House of Undying in this book. There's definitely something very magical about that building.
Yeah.
And then you have, of course, Tyrion. We realize that the Red Keep and the Tower of the Hand, there's lots of man-made mystery built into that. The secrets of that can definitely be unlocked. But if you think back to Ned in A Game of Thrones, he does talk about the unnatural darkness of the dungeons in the Red Keep. So, I mean, and that's a new building. Like, that's a very new building. That's a very recent building. It's the most recent building. So it would make sense, you know, that we could be in a regressive period in the history of Westeros, in that it seems that the engineering that came before and the magic that came before and the enchantment that came before was far more advanced than anything that has come since.
I think there's a lot of cyclical things happening in this story, and I think a lot of knowledge and learning has been lost each generation as we go forward. And all this, like the North remembers, is the North has forgotten what it's supposed to remember. And it's now just become this phrase similar to winter is coming and there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. It's like people say these things as part of some legendary sort of mantra, but they've kind of forgotten what it actually really means. And sometimes it can just be something really literal, like that you've always got to have a Stark inside the parameters of Winterfell because there's a magical connection between the Stark blood and the actual physical foundations of the castle that protects it somehow against some sort of magical, you know, it gives it some sort of magical defenses. This chapter, it just ripples with this sense of the Winterfell being a character, being a sentient living being within the story.
Has, like, Westeros forgotten, or has it been hidden? So if you take the wildlings, for instance, the wildlings don't have maesters, but they have an awful lot of knowledge. Like Osha has an awful lot of knowledge. She doesn't, you know, it seems to me that the network of maesters has been actively hiding or just
rewriting,
ignoring history and the history of magic and the potential for magic and what it can do for generations, because maybe they're afraid of it, which they may have good reason to be afraid of it. But yeah, Connie says it was my first thought when described as a great tree. Yeah, and Winterfell ended there. Winter is coming. Yeah, and you know, another magical place that we had, of course, in this book.
Yeah, winter literally fell. Winterfell.
Winterfell. Yeah, another magical place that we had, of course, was the village that Jon goes to when he first goes to the north. What's it called again?
White Tree.
White Tree. Yes.
Right,
yeah. So that gives you an indication of, like, the entire village is built under the branches of this tree.
Yes. Yeah. There's something going on under the underground, I think, with the roots go deep.
So
definitely.
It would seem to me that any maester who has a Valyrian chain, a Valyrian ring, they would instantly be sent to Winterfell. because you'd have to have knowledge. I bet if we had like a history of the maesters at Winterfell, all of them would have studied. That would probably be one of the things that would make that would have to lead to you being a maester at Winterfell.
Yes, you're right, Connie. White Tree is terrifying. It did that horrible, you know, the all the bones for a start.
So the other thing that you know, Bran takes, it's funny because they can't see anything when they're in the crypts, but he looks on Ned's face for the last time. So is there something about Ned's face that he's able to see it in this darkness? And he says for the last time, you know, this is it. The suggestion being he'll never be in the crypts again. And he wonders at the end, will he ever see Winterfell?
Winterfell, yeah. He gets the sense that this is the last time.
But we know that he does see Winterfell again, maybe not in person. We get the impression that he sees Winterfell again later on.
Yeah, we can see him. Well, he sort of sees things that are happening in the Godswood, and he's sort of travelling through time. There's just going back to Lewin again and talking about the children being safer apart. This also plays into all sorts of other different theories. You know, the twin theory of Jon and Daenerys. Take your pick. Jon and Daenerys, Jon and Mira. You know, a number of different things, but there does seem to be, you know, there's precedent for this. If you've got something that's valuable, and you've got more than one thing that's valuable, then keep it in. MP used to talk a lot about coin purse, and there's a reference to Ned in the crypts in King's Landing where he talks about not keeping all your eggs in one basket, basically. And also Rob as well with the will. There's something in there as well about keeping things, you know, keeping your valuables located in different areas. So this seems to be a thing that's in the story a lot, which makes me think that this
Tyrion even does it with Marcella.
Yes, yeah, and with the babies at the wall and things like that, you know, the kind of swap there. So yeah, this seems to happen a lot. I mean, it makes sense, you know, keep your valuables in different locations, which again makes you think, well, you know, Daenerys, where was she born? Was she Stormborn because it was Dragonstone, or was she Stormborn because she was squirreled away somewhere to safety, you know, in a different location, and it was actually Storm's End, and Davos brought her in as, like, you know, disguised as onions and whatever. I'm
liking that theory more and more.
There definitely seems to be this theme of keep your treasures in different locations. You know, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Keep the boys separate.
Which is kind of what people are trying to tell Dany in a cryptic kind of way with the dragons, and you wonder, will that be a problem for Dany later on? Like, I know they're separated now, the dragons, going into Winds, but I wonder later, keeping all of them together, is that going to be a problem? You know, is that going to make them more vulnerable because she hasn't separated them, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
It'd be easier to pick them off or something. Connie says, is there something about bones that Ned's bones might have been of value, like magical Isle of Faces or Greywater Watch? I mean, Ned isn't there really in the crypts, right? So when Bran says he's looking at Ned for the last time, he's not really, because Ned isn't there, so his bones aren't there. So there may be. I think
there is something about, but the fact that the bones of the dead are always brought back to. There seems to be something of absolute urgency about, you must make sure, I don't care how I die, what happens, whatever, promise me, Ned, you know, my bones must make it back to the crypts in Winterfell. So maybe there is something more than just superstition. Maybe there is something kind of mystical, magical that connects the bones. I mean, we hear a lot about blood magic and the importance of king's blood and things, but maybe there is a connection, magical connection to the essence of somebody else, somebody other than their blood, is their bones. So maybe there is something there.
Is Rob now back in Winterfell? Where's Rob's bones now?
Again, I think they were. Oh,
I don't know what happened to them.
Well, his head got separated from his body, didn't it? Because of they replaced it with the wolf's head. I know they had his body.
Yeah.
But I don't know what happened to his bones. I can't remember.
I don't know why it popped into my head. I can't remember either. So, do you think any of the Starks will be back in the Winterfell crypts in Winds of Winter? Do you think we'll see any Starks down there? Or, I mean, like, do you think we'll be back in the crypts even in Winds of Winter?
It seems to be an important place.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I think we will, but I'm not sure why or how. But I think it seems to be an important location that we will revisit, I'm certain.
I think there's a reason why Lyanna is there. She's the only woman that's down there. I think it's important. I think there's something hidden down there for with Lyanna.
Yeah, so possibly she was buried with something from Rhaegar. Yeah.
Bag of onions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's everything that I had on this. Yeah, that's it really. It's quite an adventure. I feel Bran Stark is in the crypts now. I think Bran is left behind Bran, if that makes sense. I think from now on we're going to get a very different.
He becomes the three eye. He's opened his third eye.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, he did that in the crypts. It says
in
the chapter he opened his third eye while he's been there in the crypts. Whereas all the other kings and princes and lords, whatever, of Winterfell haven't. They possibly had the ability to. George says that all of the Stark children in the story, in the current story, have warging abilities. Does that mean that if you have Stark blood, automatically you're a warg?
Well, that might open up very interesting theories on Benjen. And so Osha said that they're probably going to go towards the south and White Arbor with Rickon.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how the reason why I say Bran leaves himself behind in the crypts as well is he not disowns Rickon, but he can very quickly separate himself from his brother.
Yeah, there was quite, it was just saw the back of Shaggy Dog's tail round the corner of the broken tower, and it was like, right, that was it. It did seem very swift, actually.
It was very cold. And fair play to Jojen and Mira for sticking with him. I guess that's Jojen. I wonder would Mira turn back at this stage. But yeah, that's it. I mean,
there's a reference where Osha talks about how she is bristling about what's happened to Winterfell, and she says the others, if the gods are listening, the others will take them. Which makes me think that ultimately that could happen in reality, that the others take the Boltons and oust them out of Winterfell.
That would be great. And that would be great. So that's it then. That's it for Clash. And Connie says that she doubts the phrase would have returned Rob's bones. Yeah, I doubt it as
Yeah,
well.
true.
It just made me wonder what the implications of that are, I guess, if Rob is a Stark, of course. There are theories out there that he's not, and that Bran is actually the firstborn Stark. So, anyway, male Stark, I should say. All right.
So we're back. We're taking a couple of weeks break.
Back on the 8th of April, and we're going to read all the way from Prologue to Davos 1, which is already a spoiler. Davos makes it. So yeah, and we'll be starting off with Prologue, which is north of the wall, and then our first POV is Jaime. I cannot wait for Jaime chapters. I'm really excited about Jaime chapters. And who else are we getting? There's someone else. Oh, Sam. We're getting Sam chapters.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So so that's exciting. So we'll be back on the 8th of April. The schedule is listed down below, and just one of the dates is a Friday. So just double check if you want to join us live. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us live in the chat, and to everybody who's been following along since January. Storm is a big one. It's going to take us all the way into July. So hopefully spring will have started. Because by the time we finish Storm, winter will already be coming at this rate.
Yeah.
Because this has been the longest winter ever. So thank you so much, Connie, and thank you to everybody. Thank you, Claire. And if you're celebrating Easter, enjoy your Easter. If not, hopefully spring will come wherever you are.
Yes, no more snow.
Yeah, no more snow. So thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening and a lovely week. Lovely 2 weeks.
See you in a couple of weeks. Bye.